The rain had just started when the doorbell rang. I remembered that detail because I was folding Lily's laundry, her small socks, her dinosaur pajamas, the little unicorn shirt she'd cried over that morning because I hadn't washed it in time. She was 5. Her whole world still fit inside things like that. From the hallway, I could hear her in the living room, humming to herself, lining up her stuffed animals in a row like she was taking attendance. She did that when the house felt tense, I'd noticed. She'd quietly gather her toys close, like she was building herself a small wall of comfort. Children know before anyone tells them. They feel the temperature of a room change long before they have words for it. Marcus was in the kitchen, pouring himself a whiskey he didn't need. He'd been drinking more lately, talking less, looking at our 5-year-old daughter like she was a stranger he'd accidentally let into his house. Just that morning, Lily had run up to him with a drawing, a lopsided sun, 3 stick figures holding hands, my family scrawled across the top in her careful, backward letters. She'd held it up to him with both hands, the way kids do when they're offering you their whole heart on a piece of paper. Marcus had barely looked at it. "Not now, Lily." "Daddy's busy," he'd said, and stepped around her like she was a piece of furniture in his way. I'd watched her small hands lower the drawing, watched her walk it over to the refrigerator herself and hang it up alone, because no one had helped her. She didn't cry. That was almost worse. She was already learning not to expect him to look up. A week before that, she'd tugged on his sleeve while he read something on his laptop, bouncing a little on her toes the way she did when she was excited about something. "Daddy, are you still coming to my school play? I'm a sunflower. I have a yellow costume and everything." He hadn't turned his head. "We'll see, Lily. Daddy's got a lot going on, but it's on Friday." "You said." I said, "We'll see." His voice had an edge to it that made her stop bouncing. She stood there a moment longer, waiting for him to look at her, to say something that sounded like a promise instead of a dismissal. When he didn't, she wandered off to find me in the kitchen, quieter than she'd been 5 minutes earlier, and asked instead, "Mommy, will you come to my play?" I wouldn't miss it for anything, I told her, and meant it with my whole chest and hated in that moment how much weight a 5-year-old had already learned to put behind the word anything, because she'd learned the hard way that not everyone meant it. Friday came. He didn't. "I'll get it," I said, but he was already moving, faster than I'd seen him move in weeks, like he'd been expecting someone. I stood in the hallway and watched him open the door to a man I didn't recognize, tall. Gray suit, the leather folder tucked under his arm, rain beating on his shoulders. "Marcus Bennett?" the man asked. "Who's asking?" "David Reyes. I'm a private investigator." He glanced past Marcus, toward me, toward Lily's crayon drawings taped to the wall. "I was hired 6 years ago by a woman named Sarah Cole. I believe you knew her." I watched my husband's face drain of color. "I don't know what you're talking about," Marcus said too quickly. "She's not my child," he suddenly blurted, turning to me, panic dressed up as anger. "Whatever this is about, Lily isn't mine. I've been trying to tell you that for months." I heard the humming in the living room stop. I turned, and there she was in the doorway, clutching her stuffed rabbit to her chest, looking between her father and the stranger in the rain with the wide, searching eyes of a child trying to understand why the ground had just moved. She didn't fully understand the words. She understood the tone. She understood being unwanted. That part translates at any age. "Mommy?" she said so quietly I almost didn't hear it over the rain. Something in my chest cracked open. Not for me, for her. I crossed the hallway and picked her up, felt her small arms lock around my neck, felt her face press into my shoulder, like she was trying to disappear into somewhere safe. I pressed my hand against the back of her head and made myself breathe evenly, so she wouldn't feel my heart slamming against my ribs. The words landed like a slap, not because I believed them for a second. I'd seen the paternity results Marcus thought he'd deleted 8 months ago. Hidden in a folder labeled taxes, I knew, with total certainty, that Lily was his daughter. The slap wasn't doubt. It was understanding all at once. Exactly what kind of man could look at his own child and use her as a shield. I finally understood why he'd been pulling away from her. From us for the better part of a year. Every skipped bedtime story, every birthday party he'd left early for, work. He'd built himself an excuse, quietly, brick by brick, for months, and he was using this stranger's arrival to finally say it out loud, hoping the shock of it would bury him a little deeper in my sympathy, instead of my suspicion. I held my daughter tighter and looked at my husband over her small shoulder, and for the first time in our marriage, I let him see exactly what I thought of him on my face. The investigator didn't even blink. He opened his folder. "That's interesting," he said calmly, "because the woman who hired me, Sarah Cole, has been trying to find you for 6 years, not because of a child." He paused, and I felt the air in the hallway go still. "She wants to know why you left her to cover it. $2,100,000 embezzlement charge that you filed under her name at Whitmore Financial. She did 18 months in a federal facility for a fraud you committed. She has documents, bank transfers, and a signed confession from your former business partner. My question, Mr. Bennett, is simple. Are you going to tell your wife, or should I?" The whiskey glass slipped out of Marcus's hand and shattered on the tile. "I want to tell you I felt shocked." I didn't. Not really. I felt something colder. The click of 100 small moments finally locking into place. The unexplained business. Trips. The account, he said, was for Lily's college fund that I was never allowed to see the statements for. The calls he took in the garage with the door shut. I thought of the night, 3 months earlier, when Lily had a fever and wouldn't stop crying, and I'd begged him to help me carry her downstairs for medicine. He hadn't even looked up from his phone. "You're the mother," he'd said. "This is your job, not mine." I'd carried her down alone, her small body burning against my chest, and told myself he was just tired. I'd told myself a lot of things. I thought of the morning. I found Lily sitting outside his home office door with her shoes on the wrong feet, waiting for him to notice her so he could walk her to the bus stop like he'd promised. He'd opened the door 40 minutes later, stepped over her, and said, "Why are you sitting on the floor? Get up, you look ridiculous." She was 4? "Get out of my house," Marcus said to the investigator, his voice cracking, the fear in it dressed up badly as authority. "I will," David Reyes said, "but she won't be quiet much longer. She's out. She's rebuilding her life, and she wants what's owed to her." He looked at me, and something in his expression softened, not pity. "Exactly, recognition, ma'am. You should know that your name is also on some of these accounts. Joint accounts. If the fraud investigation reopens, you may be asked to answer for money you didn't know was stolen." That was the moment I stopped, being the woman standing quietly in her own hallway. "Show me everything," I said. Over the following 3 weeks, I learned who I had actually married. Marcus hadn't just betrayed a woman named Sarah Cole. He'd built our entire life, the house, the car, Lily's private preschool, on money he'd funneled out of client accounts at his old firm and hidden behind shell companies with names like Ridgeline Holdings and Bennett and Cole Advisory, a company that used a woman's identity she never agreed to. When the fraud was discovered, he'd already erased his own fingerprints and left hers all over it. He'd changed his last name slightly, moved states, married me, and never once looked back. He hadn't accused Lily of not being his because he doubted her paternity. A DNA test, one he'd secretly taken 8 months earlier, had already confirmed she was his. He said it that night because he was drowning, and he needed something, anything, to throw between himself and the truth walking up our driveway. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. Not in front of him. I did something worse. From his perspective, I got quiet and I got organized. I met Sarah Cole in person 2 weeks later, in a small coffee shop with bad lighting and good coffee. She was thinner than her old photos. Tired in the particular way, people are tired after fighting, a system that didn't believe them. She'd lost her house, her name in every professional database, 4 years of her career, and 18 months of her life for a crime she never touched. "I don't want your pity," she told me. "I want him to lose everything the way I did." "Then let's make sure he does," I said, "legally, completely, and this time with my help instead of my ignorance." We didn't need to destroy Marcus with anger. We destroyed him with paperwork. I handed over 3 years of financial records I'd quietly photographed before he could shred them. Sarah's lawyer combined them with David Reyes's investigation and her original case file. Between the reopened fraud investigation, the IRS inquiry into the shell companies, and the civil suit Sarah filed for wrongful conviction and defamation, Marcus's carefully built second life came apart in under 4 months. The final hearing was on a gray Tuesday in November. I sat 2 rows behind Sarah, with Lily at home with my sister. Because some things a child should never have to watch, even from a distance. Marcus sat at the defense table, in a suit that no longer fit him the way confidence once had. 4 months of unraveling had aged him 10 years. His lawyer whispered something to him. He didn't respond. He just stared at the table. The same table where, months earlier, he'd looked at a 5-year-old and called her a stranger to save himself. Sarah sat perfectly straight beside her attorney, hands folded, jaw tight. 6 years of stolen time compressed into the stillness of her shoulders. The judge, a woman with silver hair and a voice that didn't rise but didn't need to, read through the findings without ceremony. The falsified transfers, the shell companies built in Sarah's name without her knowledge. The identity Marcus had discarded and rebuilt 3 states away. The years Sarah had spent behind a number instead of a name, because a man had needed somewhere to hide. "Mr. Bennett," the judge said finally, looking at him over her glasses, "you didn't just steal money. You stole 6 years of this woman's life, her reputation, and her ability to trust the systems that were supposed to protect her. The court finds no mitigating circumstance that excuses what you engineered, deliberately and repeatedly, at the expense of an innocent person." She let the silence sit for a moment before she continued, her tone never rising, never needing to. "This court sentences you to the maximum term available under the fraud and identity statutes, orders full financial restitution to Ms. Cole, and enters a formal judgment vacating her prior conviction, effective immediately." I watched Marcus's jaw tighten, watched the color drain out of his face in slow degrees, the way it had that first night in our doorway. Except this time, there was no wife left to perform for, no daughter to hide behind. His shoulders curled inward. For the first time since I'd known him, he looked small, not powerful enough to be frightening. Just a man finally facing the size of what he'd done, with nowhere left to put it. Beside her attorney, Sarah Cole went very still, as if she needed a second to be sure she'd heard it. Right, vacated immediately. Then her composure broke all at once. She put her face in her hands and wept, not quietly, not politely, but the way you weep when 6 years have held breath. "Finally, leave your body in one motion." Her attorney wrapped an arm around her shoulders. She kept saying something under her breath, over and over, and I realized, watching her lips, that it was simply thank you, thank you, thank you to no one in particular. To the room, to whatever had finally tipped in her favor after 6 years of nothing tipping her way at all. A stranger too rose behind, reached forward, and squeezed her hand. I realized distantly that the stranger was me. Marcus turned in his seat, searching for me across the courtroom. The way he used to search for me across a room when he wanted comfort. I met his eyes. I didn't look away, and I didn't reach for him. "I'm sorry," he mouthed. It was the same voice he'd used on our daughter's drawing. "Not now, I'm busy. Too late." In every sense that mattered. I thought of Lily hanging her drawing on the refrigerator alone. I thought of her small body burning with fever in my arms while he scrolled his phone. I thought of her sitting on the floor with her shoes on the wrong feet, waiting for a father who stepped over her. I didn't say anything back. I simply stood, buttoned my coat, and walked out to pick up my daughter. He lost the house, the one he thought was safely in his name. He lost his job, his reputation, and any hope of controlling the narrative, because I made sure the truth reached every person who'd ever trusted him, including his own mother. I kept Lily. I kept my name. I kept the small, fierce clarity that comes from finally seeing someone completely, instead of the version of them you'd built out of hope. Sarah Cole got her name back, her record cleared, and 6 months later, a job at a firm that actually checked references. We still get coffee sometimes. We don't talk about him much anymore. There's not much left to say. That night, after the verdict, I picked Lily up from my sister's and drove her home in the rain. The same rain that had been falling the night the stranger knocked on our door. She fell asleep in her car seat before we made it home, her rabbit tucked under her chin, and I watched her in the rearview mirror at every red light, thinking about how close I'd come to spending years defending a man who never once, not even for a moment, deserved either of us. It all started with one question, asked by a stranger standing in the rain at my door. Are you going to tell your wife, or should I? I never got the chance to lie his way out of that one, and neither of us, not me, not Lily, and not Sarah Cole, ever had to make room in our lives for him again.